She cheated on me last night. I didn't catch her in the act, not exactly, but I saw enough. Enough to know that the woman I married, the woman I built my life around, had given a part of herself to another man. Sophia had always been good at lying, too good, maybe. I used to admire it in small ways, the way she could charm her way out of a parking ticket or talk her way into a reservation at a fully booked restaurant. It was effortless for her, that ability to weave a narrative so smoothly that even I, the man who knew her better than anyone, could be fooled. But last night, the mask slipped. It started with something small, something so insignificant that I might not have noticed if my gut hadn't already been whispering warnings to me for weeks. A message notification she swiped away too quickly, her laugh at dinner sounding just a bit too forced, the way her gaze flickered toward the door every time her phone vibrated. She thought I wouldn't notice. She thought I wouldn't put the pieces together. But I did. I followed her. Not out of paranoia. Not because I wanted to catch her. God, I wanted to be wrong. I wanted to find her exactly where she said she'd be, sipping wine with her girlfriends at some overpriced bar downtown, rolling her eyes at the idea that I'd ever suspect her of something so low. Instead, I found her with him. A stranger at first glance, tall, confident, well-dressed. The kind of man who looked like he belonged in glossy magazine spreads or expensive watch commercials. He had the air of someone who had never had to fight for anything in his life. Someone who took what he wanted without ever considering the wreckage he left behind. And she looked at him the way she used to look at me. That was the part that gutted me the most. Not the secrecy, not the betrayal, but the way her body leaned into his without hesitation, as if he was her home now. As if I never had been. I didn't confront her, not yet. Instead, I stood there in the shadows, watching, memorizing every detail. The way her hand brushed his arm, the way he whispered something in her ear that made her laugh, soft and real. The way she kissed him, slow and deliberate, as if savoring the moment. I should have walked away then, but I didn't. Because that was the moment I realized this wasn't just a mistake. This wasn't some drunken lapse in judgment, some fleeting act of impulse. No, this was something deeper. Something that had been growing, festering beneath the surface for God knows how long. She wasn't just cheating on me. She was choosing him. And that was the part one couldn't forgive. A friend of mine once told me that if you ever have to go looking for proof, you already know the answer. I used to think that was paranoia. Now I know it's wisdom. The night after I saw Sophia with him, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of something irreversible pressing down on my chest. She was curled up beside me, her breath slow, even peaceful, as if nothing had changed. As if she hadn't just spent the evening wrapped around another man. I turned my head and watched her. Really watched her. There was a time when I would have done anything to keep her happy. In the early years, before the cracks formed, I had worshipped the ground she walked on. I had spent nights memorizing the way she looked when she slept, the way she curled her fingers into the sheets when she dreamed. I had loved her with everything I had. And now? Now I didn't even know who I was looking at. I waited until she left for work the next morning before I started digging. Not because I needed confirmation, I already had that, but because I needed to understand. I needed to know how long this had been going on, how deep her betrayal ran. Her phone was locked, of course. She had changed her passcode weeks ago, another warning sign I had ignored. But her laptop? That was different. She wasn't as careful with that. It only took me 5 minutes to find the messages. They weren't on her usual accounts. No, she was smarter than that. A hidden email, one I had never seen before, buried beneath layers of fake work-related folders. But once I found it, the floodgates opened. Months. She had been with him for months. My eyes skimmed over the emails, a sick feeling twisting in my stomach with every line. Plans to meet, late-night confessions, inside jokes I wasn't a part of. The worst part? The way she talked about me. He suspects nothing. He's been so busy with work, he barely notices when I come home late. I feel guilty sometimes, but then I remember how alive I feel when I'm with you. Alive. Like I had been suffocating her. Like I had been the weight holding her down instead of the man who had given her everything. I slammed the laptop shut, my hands shaking. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something, to break something, to do anything to silence the roaring in my head. But instead, I just sat there, staring at nothing, my entire life crumbling around me. Because now I knew the truth. Sophia wasn't just cheating on me. She had built an entirely different life, one where I was nothing more than an afterthought. And the worst part? I still hadn't decided what to do about it. The old me would have confronted her that night. The old me, the man who believed in love, in loyalty, in the vows we had spoken, would have waited for her to walk through the door and demanded an explanation. He would have shouted, maybe even begged, desperate to understand how the woman he adored could look him in the eye and lie so easily. But the old me was gone. I didn't want her apologies. I didn't want her excuses. I wanted answers. So, instead of confronting Sophia, I did something else. I went looking for him. His name was Daniel Carter. A quick search pulled up everything I needed. 34, single, worked in finance. One of those sleek, modern types who probably spent more money on hair products than I did on my mortgage. He had an apartment in the city, not far from the hotel where I had first seen them together, and his social media was polished, curated, like a goddamn magazine spread. He looked like the kind of man women fell for. He dressed well, carried himself with confidence. He had a smile that seemed effortless, like he had never known failure a day in his life. And he was sleeping with my wife. I spent hours combing through his life, his posts, his tagged photos, anything that could give me insight into who he was. The more I found, the more I realized something wasn't adding up. Daniel wasn't just some guy Sophia had fallen for. He was looking for something. His social media screamed success, expensive suits, first-class flights, luxury cars, but there were cracks in the image. His job history was vague, his company had no real online presence, and despite the high-end lifestyle, there were no signs of old wealth or long-term success. He was playing a role. But for what? I scrolled further, digging into every piece of information I could find, and that's when I saw it. A business deal. A name I recognized. Sophia's company. A cold realization settled over me. This wasn't just about an affair. This was bigger. Sophia hadn't just betrayed me with some random man. She had chosen someone with a purpose. Someone who was using her for something. And that meant I had something I could use, too. I closed my laptop, my mind racing. I wasn't going to be the heartbroken husband. I was going to be the man who burned their world to the ground. Revenge isn't about rage, it's about control. The moment I realized that Daniel Carter wasn't just some fling, but a man with an agenda, my pain sharpened into something else. Something colder. More calculated. Sophia thought she was playing a game. She had no idea I had just joined in. Step 1. Gathering more evidence. I needed to know exactly what Daniel wanted from her. Was she just another conquest? Or was there something bigger at play? The business connection between his name and her company wasn't a coincidence. There was something deeper, and I wasn't about to let it slip past me. So, I did something I never thought I would. I befriended him. It wasn't hard. Daniel lived in a world built on networking, fancy events, high-end clubs, exclusive business circles. All I had to do was put myself in the right place at the right time. I started small. A few carefully planned run-ins at corporate functions I knew Sophia attended. A casual introduction here, a polite conversation there. I played the role of the clueless, good-natured husband, the man who had no idea his wife was being shared like a dirty secret behind his back. And Daniel? He had no idea who I was. At first, it was almost funny. The way he smiled, shook my hand, made small talk like we were just two strangers. The way he spoke about business opportunities in the city, never realizing that I had already pieced together the truth. Then, a week later, I made my move. I lied my way into a private investors gathering. I wasn't wealthy, not like the men in that room, but I pretended to be. A borrowed Rolex, a tailored suit, a little confidence, it was shockingly easy to blend in. And that's where I saw them. Sophia and Daniel. Together. She was different with him. Looser, freer. The woman who came home to me every night, pretending to be exhausted from work, sighing about deadlines, was right there, standing too close, smiling too brightly. I should have been angry. Instead, I was focused. Because that was when I learned why Daniel was here. Step 2. The truth about Daniel Carter. As I worked my way through the crowd, shaking hands, making small talk, I kept my ears open. And soon, I had everything I needed. Daniel wasn't a real businessman. He was a con artist. Oh, he had money for now. But it wasn't his. It came from deals he manipulated his way into, seducing women with connections, using them as leverage, and then jumping ship before the consequences caught up to him. And Sophia? She was just another stepping stone. I stood there, watching the two of them from across the room, my mind racing. She had no idea. She thought she was choosing him over me. She thought she was trading up. But Daniel Carter wasn't a man who loved her. He was a man who was about to ruin her. And I wasn't going to stop him. I was going to let it happen. Then, when she was at her lowest, when she had nothing left, I would be the one to walk away. Revenge doesn't always require action. Sometimes, the best thing you can do is nothing at all. Sophia had spent months, maybe years, lying to my face, slipping out of our life to build another with Daniel. And now? Now, she was walking into her own destruction, and I was going to let her fall. Step 1. Learning the game. Over the next few weeks, I played my role perfectly. I pretended to be the oblivious husband, the one who had no idea his wife was slipping away. I asked her about work, kissed her goodbye in the mornings, cooked dinner like nothing had changed. I made sure she felt safe. And Sophia? She bought it. She came home late more often, her excuses lazy, her affection for me almost non-existent. Some nights, she wouldn't even bother lying about where she had been, and I let her think she was getting away with it. At the same time, I stayed close to Daniel. We weren't friends, not really, but I made sure he liked me. I played the part of the quiet, successful investor, nodding along to his stories, feeding his ego. I watched the way he worked a room, how he charmed his way into deals he had no business being part of. And then I saw it. The pattern. Daniel never stayed in one place too long. 3 to 6 months, then gone. He wasn't looking for love. He was looking for an opportunity. Sophia wasn't just his affair. She was his next investment. Step 2. Making sure she dives in. I needed her to trust him completely. So I pushed her toward him, without her even realizing it. I stopped initiating affection. I let the distance between us grow, let her think I was losing interest in her, that I was just another husband too caught up in his own world to see what was happening right in front of him. I let her believe that Daniel was the only man who truly saw her. And it worked. One night, as she sat across from me at the dinner table, picking at her food, she let it slip. I think we need some time apart. I looked up, pretending to be confused. What? I don't know, she sighed, rubbing her temple like it pained her to even say the words. I feel like we're just existing. Like we're not really in love anymore. She wanted me to fight for her. She wanted me to ask what was wrong, to beg her to stay, to make her feel guilty. I didn't. Instead, I sighed, running a hand through my hair. Maybe you're right. That startled her. She blinked, clearly not expecting me to agree. You think so? I mean, we've been together for a long time, I said, forcing my voice to sound tired. Maybe we just need space. It was too easy. I watched the relief flicker across her face. She thought she had one. That she had gently freed herself from me. That she was finally getting the life she wanted. She had no idea what was coming. Step 3. Watching it all fall apart. A week later, she moved out. She didn't call it a breakup, not yet. She still wanted to keep me on the hook, just in case Daniel didn't work out. But I knew better. She wasn't testing our marriage. She was leaving me for him. And I let her. Because the second she was fully in Daniel's world, she became his problem. And Daniel Carter? He never stuck around for long. I sat back and watched as my wife, the woman who had betrayed me, lied to me, throw me aside like I was nothing, sacrificed everything for a man who didn't even want her. And the best part? She had no idea that I was the one who had orchestrated it all. Sophia thought she had one. She moved into Daniel's world without hesitation, without fear. She left behind the life we built together, our home, our marriage, me, as if it had all been an old sweater she had outgrown. And I let her go. Not because I had no fight left in me, but because she had no idea what she was walking into. Step 1. Cutting the cord. At first, she kept in touch. Little text here and there, checking in, pretending to be considerate. A test. She wanted to know if I was still holding on, if I was sitting at home waiting for her to change her mind. I gave her nothing. No calls. No messages. No late-night drunken texts begging for an explanation. I disappeared from her life as easily as she had disappeared from mine. And that was when I knew she had committed to her choice. Because now, she thought I was the one who had given up. She didn't realize that I was already watching her world unravel. Step 2. Daniel's game. The first sign of trouble came sooner than I expected. A mutual friend, one who had no idea I already knew about the affair, mentioned something offhandedly. Have you talked to Sophia? She and that guy she's been seeing, what's his name? Daniel. They've been having issues. I forced myself to look surprised. Really? They seemed pretty happy. Our friend shrugged. I don't know, man. Just something I heard. You know how these things go. I did know. Daniel wasn't the kind of man to settle down. He wasn't the kind of man to commit. He was a parasite, a leech. He latched onto women who could elevate him, women with money, power, connections. And once he had squeezed everything he could from them, he moved on. And Sophia? She was starting to realize that. Step 3. Her regret. It happened just like I knew it would. Less than 2 months after she left me, she reached out again. Hey, how have you been? I stared at the message for a long time. She didn't say she missed me. Didn't say she regretted leaving. Not yet. But I knew what this was. The first crack in her perfect fantasy. I left the message on read. Hours later, another one came. I know things have been weird between us, but I just wanted to talk. No pressure. No pressure. That was rich, coming from the woman who had pressured me into believing we were just growing apart, while she fell into another man's bed. Still, I waited. 3 days later, she called. I let it go to voicemail. The silence must have driven her crazy, because the next message was longer. Ethan, I don't know if you're mad at me or if you just don't care anymore, but I feel like we should talk. I feel like maybe I made a mistake. A mistake. The words should have made me feel vindicated. They should have given me satisfaction. But the truth? I had already moved past needing her regret. This wasn't about winning her back. This was about watching her destroy herself, piece by piece. And by the time she realized what she had lost, it would be far too late. Sophia once told me that regret was pointless. That once you made a choice, you had to own it. I wondered if she still believed that now. Her messages kept coming, each one carrying a little more desperation. She wasn't outright asking for me back, not yet, but I could see it in her words, the way she danced around her real thoughts, the way her confidence had been chipped away. Something had gone wrong with Daniel, and she wasn't ready to admit it. Step 1. Letting her feel it. I let her messages pile up. I responded once, just once. I'm doing fine, Sophia. Hope you are too. That was it. No anger, no longing, just distance. And she hated it. Her next message came fast. Can we meet for coffee? Just to talk. I didn't answer, because I wasn't the one she really needed to talk to. She needed to talk to Daniel. But Daniel? Daniel was already halfway out the door. Step 2. Watching her fall. I didn't have to do much. Daniel's pattern was predictable. The moment he couldn't get more out of someone, he started slipping away. Sophia had no idea how close she was to being discarded. And then, one night, I got a call. Not a text. A call. I didn't answer. I let it go to voicemail. When I finally played it back, her voice was shaking. Ethan, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I don't know what to do. I feel like everything is falling apart. Can you just call me back? Please. She sounded small. Like the weight of her choices was finally pressing down on her. Like she had jumped headfirst into a new life, only to realize she didn't know how to swim. I smiled. Not yet, Sophia. Not yet. Sophia had spent months choosing him over me. Now, he was choosing someone else over her. Step 1. The final clue. I wasn't sure how long it would take for Daniel to move on, but I knew it would happen. Men like him always leave when the illusion starts to crack. And Sophia? She was cracking. She had stopped pretending she was happy. Her messages were shorter, more anxious. Something was wrong. Then, one afternoon, a different message came in. Not from Sophia. From the same friend who had unknowingly tipped me off before. Hey, man, I don't know if you care, but I saw Daniel last night. And he wasn't with Sophia. My stomach tightened. Who was he with? A pause. Some other woman. They were at that rooftop bar downtown. Definitely not just friends. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. So this was it. The moment Sophia realized she wasn't special to him. That she had thrown away everything for a man who never intended to stay. Step 2. Letting the knife twist. I knew she would call. I knew she would fall apart. And I knew exactly how I was going to handle it. So when my phone rang that night, and her name flashed across the screen, I finally answered. For the first time in months. Ethan? Her voice was a whisper, raw and fragile. I let the silence stretch, let her feel the distance she had created. What's wrong, Sophia? A shaky breath. I made a mistake. She wanted me to ask. To pretend I didn't know. To comfort her. I didn't. I stayed silent, waiting. And then finally, she broke. Daniel, I don't think I ever really knew him. There it was. The first real moment of regret. The moment she realized that she had destroyed her life for nothing. I closed my eyes, savoring it. And then, in the calmest voice I could manage, I said, I know, Sophia. I've always known. Regret is a funny thing. It doesn't come all at once. It seeps in, slow and suffocating, wrapping itself around you until you realize there's no way out. Sophia was finally drowning in it. And I wasn't going to save her. Step 1. Breaking the illusion. I let my words hang in the air. I know, Sophia. I've always known. She inhaled sharply, stunned into silence. I could picture it, her standing in whatever dimly lit apartment she had moved into, her hands shaking, her perfect little fantasy crumbling around her. When she finally spoke, her voice was small. You knew. I smiled. She wasn't used to being outmaneuvered. Of course I did. I kept my tone even, detached. You thought you were being careful, but you were never as good at lying as you thought. Her breath hitched. Ethan, don't. I cut her off, my voice sharp. Don't apologize. Don't explain. I don't need it. She went quiet. I could hear it now, the sound of her breaking, piece by piece. Because this wasn't just about Daniel leaving her. This was about realizing that I had left her, too. Step 2, watching her spiral. She tried again a few days later. Can we meet? Please. I need to see you. It was almost amusing, how quickly the woman who had thrown me away was now reaching back for me. But I wasn't hers to reach for anymore. I don't think that's a good idea. Her response came almost immediately. Please. Just once. I need to talk to you. No. She didn't need to talk. She needed me to fix her mistake. And I wasn't going to. For the first time since this all began, she was completely alone. Daniel was gone. I was gone. And she had to sit with the consequences of her own choices. Sophia had always been confident, so sure of herself, so sure of her choices. But confidence means nothing when there's no one left to believe in you. And now? She had no one. Step 1, the desperation sets in. I knew she wouldn't stop. A woman like Sophia doesn't handle loss well. She had spent our entire marriage knowing that I would always be there, that no matter how bad things got, she could always come home to me. But I wasn't home anymore. And the reality of that was finally hitting her. Her messages became more frequent, more frantic. Ethan, please, just talk to me. I know I messed up, but I need to explain. I don't know what to do. Not once did she say she missed me. Not once did she say she loved me. She just needed to be saved. And I wasn't her savior anymore. Step 2, the meeting she never saw coming. I let her stew in it for a few more days before I gave her a single word. Fine. She responded in seconds. Tomorrow? Coffee? Please. I agreed. But she had no idea that this wasn't a reconciliation. This was going to be the final nail in her coffin. Because when we met, she wouldn't find the man she left behind. She would find a man who had already moved on. And nothing would destroy her more than realizing that she had ruined her life for nothing. Sophia thought this was her chance. Her last lifeline. She didn't realize she was already too late. Step 1, letting her see it. I arrived at the cafe a few minutes before her. I wanted to watch her walk in, wanted to see the moment she realized the power had shifted completely. And when she did, it was all over her face. She looked nervous. Hollow. Not the radiant, untouchable woman who had once walked out of our home, so sure that she was headed towards something better. No, this woman looked lost. And when her eyes met mine, she hesitated. Because I wasn't waiting for her with sadness, or anger, or longing. I was waiting with nothing. Indifference. And that killed her more than anything else could have. Step 2, giving her the truth. She sat down slowly, hands gripping her coffee cup like it was the only thing grounding her. I stayed silent. I wanted her to speak first. And finally, she did. I don't even know where to start, she whispered. I stirred my coffee, watching her. Try the beginning. She swallowed hard. I made a mistake. I raised an eyebrow. Which one? Her breath hitched, and for a moment, I thought she might cry. But no, Sophia didn't cry. Not for me, at least. I thought. She exhaled shakily. I thought I was chasing something real. I nodded, like I understood. And I was wrong. She said it so quietly, as if saying it any louder would shatter what little pride she had left. But it didn't matter anymore. Because I didn't care. You know what's funny? I leaned back, looking at her with the same detachment she had once looked at me with. She swallowed. What? I smiled. I knew you'd say this eventually. Sophia froze. Because she realized, in that moment, that I hadn't just been sitting around, waiting for her to figure out her mistake. No. I had been waiting for this exact moment, to let her know that it didn't matter anymore. She had lost. And she was never getting me back. Sophia always thought she was the one in control. She thought she could leave me, build a new life, and keep me as a backup plan, just in case things didn't work out. But now, sitting across from me in that cafe, she was finally realizing the truth. She had no power here. She had nothing left to bargain with. Step 1, letting her sink. She searched my face for something, anything, that would tell her she still had a chance. A flicker of love. A hint of longing. A crack in my armor that would let her weasel her way back in. She found none of it. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she murmured, her voice fragile, uncertain. I nodded. "Good. Because I don't." She flinched, looking down at her coffee, as if she could hide from the weight of her own actions. I let the silence stretch, let her feel the full weight of what she had done. Then, I delivered the final blow. Step 2. Closing the door forever. "You thought he was better than me," I said simply. Her head snapped up, eyes wide. "Ethan." "You thought you were upgrading," I continued, my voice calm, measured. "You thought I was safe, boring, replaceable. But the truth." I let out a short, humorless laugh. "You were just another one of his marks. Just like every other woman before you." Her lips parted, but no words came out. Because she knew I was right. And that was what destroyed her the most. "I thought we could at least be civil," she whispered, eyes glistening with something close to tears. I tilted my head. "Civil?" She nodded weakly. I smiled. The kind of smile that ends things. "We're being civil," I said softly. Then I stood up. No dramatic speech. No lingering stares. No last words to make her feel better about herself. I just picked up my coffee, turned my back, and walked away. Because she didn't deserve closure. She deserved exactly what she gave me. Nothing. The end. If you like this story, please like and subscribe to the channel.